All right, I think we can call the meeting to order. We do expect Beth, but Lenny, Robin, and Alyssa are all on vacation. A lot of today's meeting is going to be catching up on things and doing some forward planning because a tremendous amount happened over the last month. I think it was partly because there were some things that happened right after our last meeting. And we have a guest, which is great. We have a guest, so we'll be sure to save time for public comment if you want to do public comment at the end. Let's first do the review of the June agenda. Accept the minutes of the June agenda.
So moved.
Second, Jen, any corrections, changes? They were very thorough minutes, so all in favor? Aye. Okay, updates. Mara and Jen, you're on first.
So, go ahead, Mara. Well, this is really, I think, a piece of housekeeping because we approved the updates with some of with Beth's additions to the clarifications to the language 2 months ago, and we just didn't deal with it last time. So, I mean, basically the suggestions that we made really are all to the purpose of trying to make it kind of unambiguous that temporary art is not like a backdoor pathway to permanent installation, number one. And I guess also that we want people to have some responsibility for the care and removal, et cetera, of it. So I think that the changes from the original piece that we had presented were basically clarifications. So that's about it.
Any questions on it? Then we'll take Mara that, you put it as a motion to approve these.
Okay, I will make the motion to approve the
Okay.
changes.
And why don't you second them?
I'm seconding.
All in favor?
Aye.
And I will, Stephanie Secord let me know that she will do any updates to our website. And I'm so glad Beth is here because we did our website about a year ago, our web pages. It's really time for a refresh. Stephanie did put on like the recent press release that she just did about Spiraling Serenity, but there's a lot that, including this piece, including I realized when I went to look for something that our combined ordinance, which was passed last year, is not on it. It still has the old pieces. So I wondered, Beth, if it's something that you would take on, is just looking through web pages and saying, how could they be better updated? How could people find things more easily? I know I always have trouble finding where our art inventory is. I do a Google search for it instead of looking on the web page. So I think, but Stephanie's willing to do any of the updates for us.
Copy. She does the work, but I need to.
Definitely. So copy to Sean about
I'll
what
put
those
together
things would be.
recommendations.
Yeah, and then we can all, actually, it's something we can all look at and probably if anybody has ideas, we can float them to you and
Yeah.
then
Consolidate.
do it all at once so that we're not doing this piecemeal. Sean, Pierce Island, I think everybody's been out there, right?
Has everything been out there?
You have, yeah,
Who's been out there?
yes.
Been out there yet?
I understand. The last update is there'll be some loam and grass or grass seed and covered cement. So that's the last piece that DPW really went above and beyond.
Yeah.
I'm a little nervous about that. They were all smiling. They had some long days and they were there basically at the on call there. Different trucks, rocks, dirt, stuff for the crew, which they worked really hard too.
And was that in conjunction with somebody from DeBari or
It
their
was-
engineer?
Yeah.
Or how'd that work?
The crew came which included the fabricator, Brian. He brought two of his crew that work with him. That's who Dabari hired to create it, but they were also measuring the hole, and then they actually dug the hole, and then they were just amazing with all the different talents they exhibited in a couple of day period, and they stayed for the weekend and enjoyed our area. So
Nice.
great.
but I was amazed how they were digging and pouring the cement and measuring the hole and how much rock, and it's just a lot of skills. It wasn't just I'm a metal fabricator.
Right.
So they were pretty amazing.
Yeah.
And just pleasant people.
Yeah, they seem very nice. And if you had a chance to see the understructure for it, I think, I remember how much time we spent talking about that, but and I could fully understand why they had to put it together in Texas, because it was welded to this incredible superstructure. It's never gonna go
Yeah, it
anywhere.
was to an I-beam,
You're right.
and then they dug 4 feet down and put the stone, and then they put the rebar wrapped around, tied it around the I-beam.
Yeah.
Leaving space for the cement to go in, and then they poured the cement. I mean, it's gonna be there for a while.
Rock solid.
Right. And the person who was installing it assured me that the surface was graffiti proof, that if someone
Yeah.
graffitied it, they could just hose it off.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was specially coded for
Yeah.
that, which I think is something we need to do with everything going forward. I know it costs more, but I think in the long run, it probably saves a lot.
I think so.
As I went to touch it and it does have a different texture to it. So I think it seems like it's gonna work.
Will that have to be refreshed at some point? The
Paint standpoint,
Well, no,
the
the
graffiti.
graffiti.
Yeah,
Good
they are gonna leave us, or if they haven't already, with the maintenance schedule, which is, I think, standard
Oh, wow.
operating procedure.
because I would think that, after a while, it must erode between the weather and the amount of
Yeah.
people touching it.
Yeah, that's part of the contract, is they need to give us the documentation on how to maintain it.
That's great.
It will be big fun thing.
So perhaps we could do, like, on behalf of the committee, to the mayor, a thank you for all the work the DPW did to make this happen, because I think the coordination was really good on both sides.
Right,
It
right,
was really
because
good.
they had to move a lot of material from the road
Right.
to the site. And they rented all the equipment. Some of it they did themselves. They held them to the contract. It's my job.
And thanks Sean then too.
But the advanced planning
Sure.
really paid
Yeah,
off.
they were,
Yeah.
well, and Corin's point was these guys really know their stuff, which put him
That's
at
great.
ease and made him he enjoyed working with them much more than if they did. How's that? Yes.
Just two things. One, Chris had asked me to go and sort of catalog the photos, and then I incorporated some from other people
Yes.
into that PDF that Sean sent around. So that was awesome. I have newfound respect for the entire process of getting community feedback, because I was there so often. People commented and I engaged with them, and some were like, oh, why would this be chosen? I said, well, we actually had community input sessions, and if you
Good.
are interested in doing that in the future, look
Yeah.
at the newsletter. So they were like, oh, okay. So that was kind of a way to be like, okay.
And I was really glad we directed them away from doing the kind of literal Portsmouthy sort of symbols. I thought that they did a great job with the open leaf structure. I mean, it really,
It's gorgeous.
I asked David Murray, who's a drone photographer, to do before, during, and after pictures, and so he's gonna create a video. Because you really, you need to see it from above. So I think that would be something that we can put on. One thing, and Sean, you might remember in the contract, signage for it. Did we include that in the contract? Do you remember?
I'll look at it. I don't specifically recall.
Because we need to, if we didn't, we need to take the next steps with that, or ask Vito what
Right.
he would. And those of us who went last night, which we'll talk about, to the Cabot Lyford lecture, learned, which I had never realized, 3 of the 4 Cabot Lyford pieces are not signed, and there's no recognition that they're Cabot Lyford pieces.
Oh,
As famous as they are, as well-known as they are to people. So one thing we informally talked about, we can bring it up on a future agenda, is that something that we should probably do, because we have some resources to do that. So this might give us a chance to create some standard signage,
Yeah,
a template for standard signage. that we
I
use.
did go through the contract today just to see what we require from them
Yeah,
and our formal acceptance. And once upon our formal acceptance, then ask them to send the invoice for the final payment. So I'm already kind of tracking through that, but I didn't come across signage language today, but I'll look again.
yeah, so we should remember to do that. But
Yeah.
I think if there was some consistency, at least in the public pieces that we do for signage, and I don't think there was any explanation why the Cabot Lyfords have never been.
I'm sure it was an
Remember?
oversight,
Just
just
an
like we didn't
oversight.
think to do it in
Yeah.
our, I mean.
I mean, I know everywhere I go where there's public art, I look to see, my first or second question is who did this? And
Sure.
it's not consistent everywhere. I mean,
Yeah,
not
it's
as an
interesting.
excuse, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
it's so much better.
It's like it's so much work to get the piece done, you don't
And
think of it.
don't give credit to the artist.
Yeah.
It's nuts. Really.
Yeah.
You know, Stephanie Secord might be a good person to talk to about standard signage, because she does the historic plaques around the city, all the historic
Yeah,
markers that you
that's a
see
good
that have
idea.
the standard look. That's Stephanie
Good idea.
Secord.
Who's that?
Stephanie
Stephanie
Secord. Yeah, and Sean can facilitate that.
Okay, anything more about that? We'll come back to it later when we talk a little bit about what we want to do for dedication, how we want to take the next steps. And I mean, I'm glad we're not doing it now, because the grass needs time to fill in and all that. Sean, the Ferry House site.
Ferry House, we have a site chosen. Pierce.
Are you?
I'm sorry, excuse me. Scott Park, if you are in the corner where you, just before you go over the bridge to Pierce Island, and you look to your left, and there's a wall, and there's some grass, and there's a little bench, and there's the gondola. Describing that enough?
Yeah.
And there's a pathway, you
Yeah.
literally walk into Prescott Park from Mechanic Street.
Yeah.
And there is a triangle of grass.
Yeah.
That is the suitable spot.
So is that the
City
one
has.
with the sign that says no dog any season? Or is it the one
Well,
with?
that's, if you're walking in, that's to the left,
Oh, so the right
place is
where
to the
that little
right.
bench is.
Which is, so it's really visible. It's right on the path, and it's right at the entrance to
Oh,
Prescott Park from Mechanic Street.
They should be very happy with that. I think.
So I reached out to Mary just today, because I was waiting to get Corin's time back. And then we'll figure out how that goes forward.
Great.
excellent.
One quick question, is there any concern about kids climbing it because of that location not being as protected? Or,
Well, one thing they did do in the redesign, I thought they did a good job of taking away any of those sharp edges or pieces that we saw. So at least,
I think the issue is how you'd have to put it up on
yeah,
really high for no one to be able to engage with it. So I think addressing the sharpness.
we'll just have to see, I think. I mean, it's, buyer beware sort of thing, or child beware. And the same thing will happen potentially with the spiraling Serenity.
I think so too.
Mhm.
So I think it was Ellen and I were talking about like temporary camera. That it would be interesting to have, I don't know if this is anything DPW ever does, but just a temporary camera for the first month or so, just to see what might be happening.
Well, and if there are problems that they might, repetitive kinds of things, that might show up that we could correct, and then there might be some that we can't.
Yeah,
Well, I mean, if there's a problem, I'm sure we're gonna
we'll hear about it.
put signs
Yeah.
up and kind of take away from the integration of the piece. into
Yeah,
nature.
exactly.
If there's signs everywhere,
Yeah,
but
yeah, that is one thing I've heard people remark on it. In fact, how integrated it is and that the green makes it look, you're not even sure what you're looking at, which I think is one of the hopes that we had. We didn't want it to just stick out.
It'll be interesting to see how it looks in the snow.
Yeah, yes.
Cold snow.
Yeah.
So also since we have been together, Ernie presented the city council. We'll talk more about Nebby later, but Connie Bean donation, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so last city council meeting, I think it was the last city council meeting, July 14th. We presented a recommendation that the proposed Connie Bean memorial or what donation was more appropriate for a donation than for public art. And that went really well. Some members of the Connie Bean family were there and but it went really well. You know, I think they just accepted that. Do you want me to talk about Nebby or?
Let's come to
Okay.
Nebby later. I think it's good also because that's a precedent that, you know, might be something that we think about again, that's something that's not our guidelines, but fits other,
sure.
fits
then-
other things
Then it
in the
becomes a
city.
donation to the city, and
To the
city
city.
council can decide what to do with it.
Yeah.
And I was glad Kate chimed in and said, you know, this is nothing about
Yes.
the proposal itself. It's just, you know, based on what it is, it's not really, doesn't fit the public art guideline.
It's going to the school board for acceptance because the school board controls the Connie Bean building space, so.
And Ernie, why don't you continue with the meeting we had with Tom Watson? Tom is the chair of the trustees of trust funds. And we met with Tom to learn, Tom's a lawyer, so we learned a lot.
Yeah, it was a really good meeting and I took a lot of notes. But, you know, we just were, as we start to fundraise, wanted to make sure because we're not a 501c3. When we raised funds for Endeavor, it was P&H 400, which was a 501c3. And so we were a little nervous about that and whether, you know, we need to find a fiscal agent. So what we learned is that, you know, it's the Portsmouth, New Hampshire Public Art Trust, and it's a, you know, under the IRS code, it has all the benefits of donating to a 501c3. And, you know, we have all that code documented. The only problem we may run into is if a foundation requires a 501c3, because that's just what they require. And that's why we were really asking the question, because we were applying for a Fuller Foundation grant and they required a 501c3. And so I had reached out to the Portsmouth Historical Society at Chris's suggestion. And so I'm still trying to get an answer because the good news is we were selected, the Fuller Foundation, you do a letter of inquiry and then they select certain groups to do a full application. And we were selected for a full application, which is good news. But I'm still trying to determine whether we need to be a 501c3. I've asked multiple times and I'm not getting answers and I'm not sure why, but I'm gonna keep asking. And I think the deadline for that full grant is like, it's coming, no, I think it's August 20th. They said September 1st, so it's coming pretty quickly. So trying to get answers on that.
But Tom reassured us that municipalities under the IRS code qualify for a deductibility on taxes. So that was really good. And as Ernie said, he gave us all the citations.
Yeah, and he said, you know, the donations would go to the Portsmouth, New Hampshire Public Art Trust and then earmark whatever project. And he also went into what, you know, we were asking what we can accept, cash or checks, stocks, with the understanding that they would be liquidated, and donor advised funds. And I guess those are what people with a lot of money have. That's how they make decisions about, you know, where their donations are gonna go. It's a very good meeting.
Yeah.
Do you wanna say anything about?
Bob?
Yeah.
So Ernie and I realized that with things like this, we really do need, a lot of things that we have done require legal advice. And we know how busy our legal department is. And so we reached out to Bob Sullivan to ask if he would informally help us to do things. And obviously, he can't speak for the city as a retired attorney, but we thought that this would be a shortcut way that with his advice, we could write up, for example, what Tom has talked to us about, something we could give to donors, and then we could pass it by the legal department. But it would take some of the burden off of them. And similarly, as we get into some of the contract things that we'll be doing and others, and Bob was thrilled to be able to do that. So to kind of be our lawyer, that we can call upon for these various things that we are starting to run into. Because, you know, in coming up, we'll have ordinance things that we need to do and some other possibilities.
And that's the next step, to draft something that we can reach out to, you know,
Yeah.
the city council and city manager and get approved.
So next, we had the lecture last night. Ellen and Nancy were there. It was a lot of fun. We had a good turnout. Jerry Ward did a really nice job with sort of the history of public art in Portsmouth. And it's
This was at the Portsmouth
At
Historical
Portsmouth
Society.
Historical Society.
Yeah.
And he, in the book that goes with the exhibit, he has a chapter that goes through the history of public art in Portsmouth, and it's really very interesting. And realizing that, you know, we're sort of in a wave, there've been waves before of activity and inactivity. And Beth, one of the interesting things is a lot of the things that Jerry showed as examples are not things that we've cataloged.
Oh, God. Good.
You know, because he showed, which is right, like some of the gravestones that are really artistic. He showed some things that are on private, whimsical things that are on private property, but that are right along the road as you go down Route 1. And so he captured some things that we haven't captured.
Can I capture those from him? Are they somewhere capturable?
They recorded it and will make the recording available. I don't believe it's Nancy. do you-
I watched it on Zoom last night, and what I would say is you couldn't see the PowerPoints.
Oh,
So
is that
if you
right?
I would get a copy
We
of the
should get a
PowerPoint.
copy. from
I
him.
think they were gonna post the PowerPoints, but they were going to post
Yeah.
the video.
Would you like me to put you directly in touch with
Yeah,
Jerry? And we can do-
And then depending how many new ones, I'll offer it up to people
Yeah,
to
sure.
take assignments again, because that I thought worked out very well.
Yeah. And he gave great kudos to the inventory. He started his talk that way, of, you know, wishing he had had this before he started.
Good teamwork.
And there were good questions. We were able to tee up the education trust as a coming attraction. That's something that we'll be doing a call for proposals for. Barbara Ward was very interested in doing that, to do something associated with the Ona Judge mural, which seems like a perfect, absolutely perfect use. Anything else, Ellen or Nancy, that caught your eye? No. Okay. Oh, the Vaughan Law Public Information Meeting, believe it or not, that also happened since we last met, and a number of us went to that. I'd be interested in anybody's, and that filled Levinson Room, standing room only. There was a lot of interest.
Um, even though the narrative is that it is designed to have a lot of public art in the space, when I asked for specifics from the designer about where those entryways and what the size is and what, what the parameters were, because our stakeholder group for the LGBTQ piece, has some ideas, and we need to kind of figure out what the space is. He's very specific in like plinths with things on, like he was extremely specific, and I'm wondering if maybe there's a conversation that we can have that uncouples some of that specificity, that word, to the space, so that public art isn't predetermined.
Right. I'm glad you said that, Nancy, and I put on their advocacy because it occurred to me that we collectively should give a response to the city about, they shared with us ideas for bond law. Now that we've all had a chance to attend meetings and think about what it is, I think we should do a response that says what we would prioritize, what we would be wary of, what we will help with. For example, our ordinances don't allow that kind of projection. We can help by changing that ordinance. I thought that the idea that Tom Watson had about not limiting the stage just to that narrow part, but extending it back was a terrific idea, something that we could support, things like that we might want to get down in writing so that our response, including what you've just
It's a great idea.
so is it something you might be willing to take
Sure.
a first crack at?
Sure, yeah.
Then it might be something we put on for our next meeting where we can add to that.
Are there actual drawings of the space? Because that would at least give us some parameters, because it didn't look like there was, and I didn't ask him at the time.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, he,
Yeah, I don't know
Do
if
you
they're on
s-
the website yet, but they probably are.
I have them.
Yeah.
I can share them with you.
I think that they were in the paper the other day. so-
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just saw them.
Yeah.
because I saw that, so, but I mean like really, so you can get down and like,
Oh, I,
like a blueprint kind of thing that you can
No,
get in and
no, I
draw
think-
and measure, and, because they weren't
Conceptual.
because they were all conceptual. That's why I was looking, because you were looking for size and space. If you had like more blueprint type, you could actually measure and
Yeah,
say, okay.
Well,
The-
I asked for specifics, and I received them separately in an
Okay.
email just this week.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
So, and that's when I was like, oh, this is a very specific vision, like
Yeah.
literally 2 plinths, X wide and X tall, and I'm
Yeah.
like.
Laura,
It's a little, I mean, how can I say this diplomatically? Don't bother. No, I do bother. I just was a little, when we were having the presentation here and then following up with the way the project was presented at that meeting, I was just a little troubled by, I think Terrence made the actual comment that we don't really feel we need to privilege that group. Now, maybe I misheard it and I didn't understand what I heard, but that's kind of how I heard one of the comments he made. And I thought, that's not actually how we're looking at it.
Katie, it looks like you have.
So what I would say is that this process, as far as the design piece, is, I feel like we're at the beginning stages and we should treat it that way.
Yeah.
Rather than treat it like this was a finished design.
yes.
And the reason I say that is that was the first public input session. And while the city had hired this designer to create a design, that doesn't mean that should be the end result, or because the city council hasn't adopted it, it hasn't gone through that process. And even sometimes when it goes through that process, that doesn't mean it is the ideal plan, right? We have some plans coming forward next week that I don't like. You know, so that's, so just because a designer's gone through a process doesn't mean we have to approve it. And if there's a lot of pushback from the public and pushback from this committee and, you know, then we'll be forced to reconsider. Because all that's funded, the only thing that's funded is the underground work
Yeah.
right now.
So our timing is excellent because
Yes.
we can influence the
And
process.
there's a distinction between the landscape design and the public art design. I don't
Yes,
think
it's
that
important.
Terrence's role is the landscape design. He's saying, and here's some opportunities for public art. He's not saying, I don't think,
Yeah,
not saying this is the public art. That's not his role. His role is landscape design. That is his role. So there is a distinction. And I agree with
No, he
Counselor Cook that-
wasn't directing the actual public art, just the placement of it and where it could be, which very much defines the art, which I think maybe we've put the cart before the horse here.
and so I think we would have comments about the stage area, the area for the, I'll call it the open door art. And a lot of comments that I think the public made also, which I think we can weigh in on, whether that glass wall is a good idea or how to make it a better idea. So that it doesn't over time look shoddy.
And I think
Yeah.
people will also have concerns about, honestly, the streetscape. You know, to go from red brick everywhere to gray. Like a space that's suddenly just gray, which is what it is now, by the way.
Yeah.
And everybody sees it as being very dreary. Something to think about, you know, because,
Try to make
you know, if we're putting in pavers and they're gonna be gray.
Yeah.
How are we making this space uplifting and exciting? So I think
There's a lot of room.
there's a lot of room for discussion.
And I think, Sean, your clarification was really an important one to hold in mind. But I mean, being at that meeting, there was a lot of excitement because something's happening and it's changing and it's gonna,
And there's a lot of potential, I think.
yeah.
There's a lot of potential. But I think, Nancy, you're sort of speaking to something that I think one of the things about public art that can be especially interesting is that it's a little more organic and there was a symmetry, I mean, I'm not a symmetry person. There was a rigidity to the way things were laid out that I think is a little different than how we have things in the rest of the city, so it'd be great if you would take a first crack at that and then we can weigh
will.
in and
Okay.
refine it. Street Life, everybody's coming. We'll all be there together, which is exciting. Tickets are starting to go. I know Ben gave a nice shout out, Ben Van Camp gave a nice shout out to the park in terms of helping the planning. I think there's some fun things planned. Beth has provided all the photos for table.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, big thank you to Beth.
thank you.
Of
course.
Gave them the file. So I hope they're in good hands.
I hope.
Is it a lobster bake?
It's a lobster bake. The question of how we'll get tickets, what my past experience has been is a few days before, they will like give me a bunch of wrist bracelets. I don't know how they're doing it this year, but I'll be in touch with everybody, so, you know, but that's.
Can make it the 14th.
I just wanna let everyone know there are a whole bunch of dresses with lobsters on them and tops at the Portsmouth Historical Society gift shop right now. If you wanna be that's for the occasion, you can. They're not high fashion. They are whimsical.
I already have my lobster skirt.
Almost, yeah, perfect.
And the last thing in updates, Kate, to talk about the banners that we've heard about.
So the Arts and Cultural Commission has been working on an effort to get a banner program in place. If you remember the Portsmouth 400 banners that were up all over town, the goal is to have a program that helps promote our arts community, our local arts community. And we're working on details of this right now. I'm working through this with the legal department at the moment, and then it'll be a discussion with the Arts and Cultural Commission to see what we can and cannot do. But the vision is to have banners that go up approximately 3 times a year. So long-term banners for like 3 months at a time, and that organizations in town, mostly nonprofit organizations, could essentially pay the fee, because there'd be a fee associated with placing banners. So they'd have to pay for the banners themselves. They would have to pay for the costs of installation and removal, so that it doesn't actually cost the city anything. That's one of the advantages of the program, but it provides them with a little boost. Say if they have an anniversary coming up, like Prescott Park last year had their 50th anniversary. They could have had banners maybe down State Street, right? A little too late for that, but there are so many events and so many things coming up. So that's the goal. And also to provide an opportunity, maybe even to showcase individual artists. So maybe one of the galleries would be interested in doing a series on artists and doing X number of polls. So it's a work in progress. I want to be 100% clear. It's a work in progress.
Is it restricted to nonprofit or arts organizations?
Currently, we're talking about that. But I don't think that's definitive. I think that's
Yeah.
still a discussion that's gonna have to be had. I think the goal is they don't want a for-profit institution coming in saying, I want to do every single banner in town, and competing, an organization that has a lot of money competing with nonprofits, especially small nonprofits. So there has to be some balance. But one of the things that's a challenge for the Arts and Cultural Commission that Legal and I have already identified is that they're not a good organization to assist the city manager in determining what banners get approved and which ones don't. Because they're likely mostly conflicted out. They're artists, they're nonprofit organization representatives. I mean, it becomes a challenge if you're conflicted out. So there might ultimately be a role for the Public Art Review Committee, depending upon the city manager's decision, because ultimately these sites all belong to the city. So it's the city manager's decision about what happens. She can set up any kind of internal committee that she wants to do a review process. And we need to keep it in the purview of the city for legal reasons. It needs to be her.
Kate, is the
decision.
idea that they'd all be the same, or there might be variety at any one time?
I have suggested that we have some variety, so that we give, especially because we've got some small nonprofits, the opportunity just to buy 3, 5 spots, that are maybe close to their site or in a particular location. And since we have sites on Islington as well, you're gonna have totally different organizations that are interested. So that's kind of the thinking. The thing is also that we're not gonna necessarily have one at every single lamppost. We may just have some in certain locations.
Jen and then Mara and Ernie.
Well, I think that if I'm hearing it, I think what one of this committee could really help to establish the standards, because
Yeah.
that's really what you're gonna have to have, because otherwise, oh my goodness.
Yes,
I was
yes.
gonna make essentially the same.
Yeah, well, we've been doing this.
This looks like another time where we need some criteria.
Or definitely, and we have taken, I think that's great. I think what we've done is we've taken criteria from all the cities, major cities who do it. Chicago's a great example because they have a very well-developed set of criteria. And legal is currently comparing those sets of criteria. But I will say that the legal department has a lot on its plate. So any assistance that we can provide, and if anyone is interested in helping provide criteria, I think that I can offer that up
You got
to
us.
the legal department
You've got it.
and to the Arts and Cultural Commission saying, this is what public art does.
I think that would be
So-
great, especially if we eventually end up.
Oh, yeah, I think Mara and I'll take it, just connect us and let us know what we need to, how to get started
Right,
with
I mean,
it.
I think the legal stuff, obviously, that's not our purview, but
No, most of the legal considerations are around First Amendment rights and signage, and like what our signage ordinances say and and not creating a public forum space, because it's not really, that's why it stays under the purview of the city manager.
Kate, do you have any number? I mean, how many of these?
We don't know. We just
Okay.
asked for that number from
Okay.
DPW. We we were debating whether or not we even had those numbers, but we do because of the Portsmouth 400. So, but when the little signage poles aren't up, it's hard to know.
Yeah,
So
hard to figure that
yeah,
out.
yeah.
Okay, great. Anything else on that? Banners? But this is actively working its way through right now.
It is. The city council voted to go in and have legal and the Arts and Cultural Commission work on
Okay,
the program because we asked them first because we didn't want to pursue something that might not be of interest.
I think just Kate, let us know what we can do rather than step on someone's toes
Yeah.
immediately. So we'll be happy to, just let us know.
Thank you.
and it
Thank
might
you.
be actually helpful for one or both of you to go to one of the meetings of the Arts and Culture Group to maybe share the criteria that we use and
Yep.
to get some.
Happy to do that.
Be great. I can help orchestrate that too.
Great. Okay, good. Another update, but a bigger update, and Ernie also presented at the council meeting, the Nebby sculpture, so do you wanna tell us how all that went? And we
Sure.
can talk through next steps.
So it went very well. We presented at the council and we got approval to move forward with working with DPW and with using some funding for soil testing and I think maquette too. So that went great. And we are moving forward with fundraising. As I mentioned before, we did, the Fuller Foundation grant, we're a finalist, so we get to apply for that. And we're planning an event on August 20th for potential donors and of course, park members. So it's August 20th, 5:30 to 7 at the Greenhouse in Newcastle. We're meeting there tomorrow morning to
Check it out.
to check out the space and kind of figure things out. But Anthony will be there and we just really want to let people know what's happening and get them excited about the project and hopefully excited about giving money. And so we have a group working on that. Susan Labrie just joined, which is nice. And then Nancy London and Judy Miller and then Jack Siegel. This
Yep.
wonderful young man that Chris brought in. So let me think. I don't know if there's anything else. We're also meeting with, I think next week, we're gonna meet with Alex Ross, who did this soil testing for Endeavor. And he thinks what they did for that is gonna be helpful, that we'll be able to save a little money on, what we're, doing with this. So we're meeting with him next week. See what he has.
So from this group, if you remember when the artist talked to us about the maquette and the stages that I think our step should be to recommend to the council that we would like to take the first step and expend money for the maquette from funds that we have. We received from, yes, Friends of Ruth Blay, of $3,700 at our last meeting. That's still working its way through, but I think that would be a potentially good use of those dollars. So once we have the maquette, which is part of the artist process for developing it, but having the maquette also will be really helpful in fundraising because people will be able to see. It's a third size maquette. So I would put the motion forth that we would recommend to the council, which I think is the right thing to do, right, Sean, that we expend that dollars from the Public Art Trust. Or can we just
well,
go with the
Did they
city
already
manager?
Yeah.
They approved our working on this, so what do you think? We just go through the city manager?
Trustees of trust funds.
The money is not in the trust fund,
It's in a holding kind of thing.
right? Because city council is gonna
Accept it.
accept the donation. if you put it in a trust fund, then you have to take it out.
Yeah, we don't,
If sometimes I think it's okay, I'm saying this, to, if you know you're gonna spend money right away, to expend it. Because it was donated, it wasn't donated to the trust fund, it was donated to park.
right. And the
I-
fact that the council approved the whole process means we could just go to the city manager for expending that.
It's.
Question for Bob?
Yeah, I think.
The donation is. The donation is to park,
Right.
that's my point.
Right,
That was
And
good,
that's
Nancy.
approved. It will be
on Monday.
on Monday,
Yeah,
and then that will be there. It's another step to put it into the trust fund.
yeah, so we don't want to do that.
So
I don't think you do, so if you don't need to,
I guess the wrinkle in this is that we need to contract with Anthony for the maquette. We need to start that process. We need to have the legal begin developing the contract.
so that's for the maquette, not the whole thing, or is it for the whole?
Well, it's first stage. Yeah, because we don't have the money for the whole thing,
Right.
so we shouldn't do that.
Right,
It's first stage.
so the assumption is the money will be raised,
Right.
okay.
And I think the city manager can just authorize that if the donation comes in and it doesn't go into the trust. And
Right.
when the donation comes in, if it doesn't say it goes to the Public Art Trust in the packet, that if it just says it goes to the Public Art Review Committee,
Right.
then,
That's how it's structured today.
Okay.
So I
Okay.
believe you can,
Okay. So maybe I would just, presuming we'll vote on it, but then just memorialize this in a memo that goes to you, Sean. and then you can-
Right.
Does that work for everybody? Yes. So, I would just put a formal motion that we begin, working with Anthony through a contract for the maquette for $2,500.
Moved.
Moved.
second.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And as Bernie said, we don't know if we're gonna need any money for soils testing, which is good. Okay,
Be sure to specify in whatever notice you send that what happens with the remaining dollars in the interim, if you want them held or if you want them put in the Public Art Trust.
okay. Hold them for a while, yeah. Ellen, do you want to do the art exhibit that we talked about? Ellen has agreed to lead a group to take on the City Hall art exhibit, rotating art exhibit. And here are the guidelines that we worked up last time with a few tweaks that Ellen and I put in. And do you want to just talk about how we might proceed with that?
That's a good question. I think, sorry. So I think that the idea is, as it states here, is to look at having an exhibition that would be up over 4 months. And that the pieces we would, we're looking at what the scale of the pieces would be. And obviously we need to think about what kinds of theme we're talking about, whether we want to work with a specific entity or whether we want to create a theme and then ask for our artists to contribute. So I think that there's probably room for both, and maybe even some other kinds of have a cachet of 5 things that come from one place and then, then perhaps maybe there's room for more. So that's not all from the same place. So I think as we begin to work on this, we'll get a better feeling of how to proceed. There, I walked through the room before I came in here, and there will need to be the structure to be able to hang things in there, or to if it's sculptural, to whatever kinds of platform there needs to be to put the sculptures on. And I think we need to think about how to make that happen, and whether there are things already in storage here or from the past, or whether we're starting from scratch in terms of platforms and other kinds of things. And we might ask our colleagues who in the museum field around here if they have any extra things that they're not using. But I think there's still a lot to be thought about in terms of the structure of it, as well as then creating the parameters for what we're looking for to be installed there. And what Chris and I talked about is to have an exhibition that's up for 4 months. So we're changing 3 times a year. And because that seems, will be a lot of work, and that seems like a good amount of time that there will be all kinds of people who will have a chance to see it at various
And we
points.
talked about engaging, and certainly anybody on this committee who is interested in working on it, but that much as we're doing for the fundraising for the Nebby sculpture, of bringing in other folks to work on a subgroup, like people from some of the different art groups around town. Sean and I have a question, and of when we do that, when we need to go through some process, because we're an appointed committee, but it only makes sense to kind of broaden our reach. You know, we've taken on a lot. Nancy said the other night, I know I retired because we've done all these things, and people have taken, really, everybody has stepped up, but this is yet, as Ellen said, this will be a big undertaking. So to have a separate sort of subcommittee that is linked to us, but spreads the work out a little. It's really important.
Working group,
A working group. Or a task force.
task force, I think it's more.
It's more like a
comes
task
together for
force,
purpose,
right,
And then just, right.
right. Kate?
You might actually also ask the Arts and Cultural Commission to maybe give you 1 or 2 people. And the reason I say that is that one of the members of the Arts and Cultural Commission is the vice chair of the board for the New Hampshire Art Association.
Sure.
So there's some expertise there on gallery space.
Yeah, that would be great. And that would link our 2 committees as well. I think that's good.
And there is the Art Around Town group that I reached out to the chamber when we were first thinking about this. And they do have a mailing list for that, and they get together periodically. So it's just maybe somebody to communicate with when you're.
Yeah. That's great.
But if anybody else is interested, you
Interested
should
in
talk to.
working on this, please speak up.
And we should make sure Robin was. Have that opportunity.
Yeah.
So more to come.
Jess, what's the proposed, what start date? I may have missed that.
a good question.
Is it like January 2026?
I don't think that we've gotten that far. I think we
Okay.
need to have a first meeting of some kind of
Got it.
group to say, okay, let's look at what has to be accomplished and how long it will take to get the funds for
Okay.
this or purchase that, or lay out how we're gonna do this, and then we'll have a better answer.
Okay,
And there's been temporary art on the walls in the past.
Sure.
Yes,
And I recall when this was brought to me from the city manager, this discussion of what's in the Levinson room.
The
The hardware
hanging,
that allows
yeah.
for hanging. That
yes.
was Just the original genesis of the idea, understanding you're looking now at sculpture, at different pieces.
Yeah.
Right.
But that just allows for
Smoother,
a startup.
yeah.
I would highly recommend that you ask just for some advice from Amanda Kidd Kessler at New Hampshire Art Association, because they hang a full exhibit every single month, a whole new exhibit
Yeah.
every single month. They
Yeah.
have lots of experience with that, and they have lots of experience in working with the city because they hang the exhibit at Chief. in the
At Sheep Warehouse.
So, so she would be just a great person to provide advice, and she used to serve on the Arts and Nonprofits, Blue Ribbon Committee, so I'm, she's really good about supporting and working with the city. So,
Amanda's last.
Amanda Kidd Kessler, she's the executive director at New Hampshire Art Association. Okay.
We did mention it last night and there was enthusiasm for it. Ken Goldman, who was there, was very interested in
Oh, I know.
how as a photographer he could participate. So I think people will be interested in participating.
Yeah.
Okay. Art donation for the public building. This is something that I've been really closely involved in, so I can present it, but Ernie, Mara, and Jen, if you would really sort of take over the approvals of it.
Yeah.
So while Sean is doing that, this is the idea is it's another donation, donation from a group of people that I'm involved with, who worked really closely with Vernus Jackson over the 10 years that we worked on the burying ground. And Vernus, as some of you know, passed away February, March. There's a memorial service for her on Saturday, in fact. To do something that would be in her honor. And fortunately, she got to see this piece right before she died. But there's something that would be presented to the city in her honor and her memory. And okay. So Toni Morrison was a favorite of Vernus's, and this is a portrait painted on canvas that is done over excerpts from the W.E.B. Du Bois book, Souls of Black Folks, which was a really famous book from the early 1900s based on his travels in the South. So if you were looking closely at it, it's actual text. So it's text. And he did 68 different portraits like this, the artist, of prominent Black figures who over time, played a role in against racism and for Black civil rights. There were entertainers, there were writers, there were political figures, but a series of 68 of these. His name is Romeo Mivikanen. He is from the Ivory Coast. He lives in Toulouse, France right now. And he exhibits all over the world. I know of him because we purchased some of his work for the Courier. And the work it's Black acrylic painting on canvas. The canvas has repeatedly been bathed in like an elixir, so it's very stiff. And it gives that sense of like parchment, that look of parchment. It's 44 by 36 inches, so it's large. And it would be hung either by like magnets or Velcro on the back. So it doesn't weigh very much, and the whole idea is that you look at the sort of the roughness of the canvas. And I've talked to Phil Davis and Anna Nuttall at the middle school, because Vernus was, very involved with the middle school student. Obviously, those of you who don't know, Vernus taught in the public school system for many years. And was very involved with the middle school students in doing the tiles for the burying ground and that sort of thing. And also thinking of them because it seems like more appropriate than in an elementary school. And also in the middle school, there, many people would see it like in the auditorium. And we know that they're looking, they're slow at it, but they're still looking for ways to include art in the middle school. So the idea is this would be given in honor of Vernus and her service to the community. So I can answer any other questions you have about the piece. Let's see. Yeah, that basically says what I just said.
And where would it go? Do you know where?
I'm not sure where they're thinking of, but they have space in both the entryway and in the auditorium they've talked about. I'm not sure they have a particular space. And I think because this is, I did actually, because it is going into a school, I did looked up the text and gave the text to Phil so that he could look through it just to make sure that it was appropriate. You can't really read the text. As you can see, it's sort of forms a pattern behind it. You can read excerpts of it here and there. I think it would go first to the council, but then they would also take it to the school board because it's for a school building.
That's one of a kind, right?
It's a unique piece.
Yeah.
Each one was an individual, yeah, one of a kind.
Yeah. And the artist
not
knew her?
No.
So are you asking us to go over the criteria?
Yeah, I think we should, so that
Okay.
we could write it up as we
Right.
normally do, and
I mean, the site, I think I do site and artists. What do? I do the first page.
look what we've got.
I think, I'm not sure that anyone's going to disagree at this moment because we don't really, we have the approximate site, but we don't have the actual site. So I think some of those things we may not be able to answer fully.
But we could make recommendations.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You can make recommendations on where it goes. And the feasibility, I think, the durability and the maintenance, I think you've addressed already. And again, if we don't put it in sunlight, we just make sure where it's put and out of reach of sometimes some sticky fingers.
Right.
Then I think the feasibility is probably, there's not really much to say about that. The schedule, I'm not sure, just because we don't know when it's going to be donated, or has it been?
Well, we have the piece.
We have it. Oh.
It would be just awaiting.
Oh, perfect. Yeah.
Can we see it?
I don't have it with me.
Oh, you really
yes.
don't have it?
It's not here.
But yes, I can bring it to our next meeting.
Oh, that'd be insane.
Pleasure, look at it.
I guess I would just want to make sure that it's fully appreciated, because it sounds amazing. And how can you make sure that it's fully appreciated, that people realize what it is?
Yeah,
I think that goes back to signage.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
And I think there's some signage issues. I think that would be really appropriate to make sure that the signs are in there to say who she is, why we're doing this.
Yes.
And
and what the text is, especially
Right.
if it's placed in an area that's too high for you actually to
Yeah.
read the text yourself.
And
we
I'm-
want to know what it says.
Right.
And it's a little hard from this to
Yes,
understand
because
how
it's-
big
Yeah.
how big the
It's
word.
very hard to read. I mean, it's intentionally hard to read.
Yeah.
You know, it's because it's not meant to be read, but to be an artistic element.
And it
Okay.
also, is Toni Morrison part of, might maybe not be the middle school curriculum, but the high school?
High school,
Yeah, the high
yeah.
school curriculum.
And that's a dilemma because there really isn't, Vernus didn't have a particular connection to the high school, but to the middle
So
school.
could we consider rotating it to different
We could
sections for
recommend that.
exposure?
It's an easy piece to hang because of, you know, it's just really a light piece.
Can I ask if it's covered or is it?
No, it's just canvas,
That's, I mean, I guess,
raw canvas.
yeah, I mean, you know, to preserve.
You have to hang it at a
Yeah, it
certain
really
height.
worries me if it's, like
It-
anywhere
wi-
where
within
people,
reach.
invocable, graffitable,
Right.
all of that stuff. Cause I mean, it really, you know, I think that we want middle schoolers to take art seriously, but this is kind of like starting with something that's really precious.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, irreplaceable and not. And my other concern is my other concern is the text. I just, in this day and age, I think we really have to be very careful. I mean, I just read a list of banned books and
Yeah, I mean, it's a concern, and that's why, you know, Phil was very careful about it.
magnifying glass.
And even though, like, The Souls of Black Folks is just a classic, it's been well over 100 years.
And
that
it's been
doesn't-
banned in some
I'm
places.
sure it is, I'm sure it is.
Okay.
I just want to share, I share your, as a former 8th grade teacher, I share your concerns about maturity and ability to not interact with the piece of art inappropriately.
So is there something, again, I know it's pretty large, but again, this would be an additional slight cost to do it, but is there some sort of plexi that it could sit
We do that.
behind? So, you know, like you just have it on just some pegs, if you will,
Right.
and that way it's protected, it's easily cleaned. Are people gonna scratch the plexi? Maybe, but it's not touchable, but it's still very visible and it's not glass, so it's not heavy. And there's all kinds of really good plexi that you can
It's
get.
the way a museum would showcase
Yeah.
textiles. They would put it in a block, in a box,
Right.
a clear box. That would be great, yeah.
And I don't think that would really interfere with what they're trying to get across. Because I'd want to touch it.
Yeah.
Just to see what it felt like.
And that would draw more attention to it too, I think, you know, and it's so special. I think you want that. That's good.
Sounds bad. I mean,
And I think it's ultimately, so on, as far as subject matter, I think the schools would let us know if there's a problem, or the school board would let us know if they
Right.
think that they can accept it. And then it would come back.
Exactly, so it has to go through the process, yeah.
I mean, I guess if we're talking about our criteria, you know, I mean, definitely from an aesthetic point of view, does anyone have any comments and thoughts?
It's all the,
It's all of it.
yeah. Well, like, we can't say right now whether it's compatible with surroundings,
Right.
but
And I'm not sure historical accuracy is really a measuring.
Well, it is from a text, you know, it's a text, so you could say it is from the actual text. So as we typically do, I can kind of write this up and I think the cautions about appropriateness are really the challenge. You know, is it right for the middle school?
But I would also want to then think about if it isn't right for the middle school, perhaps another appropriate location, because it's, I mean, I think that it's such a visually strong piece.
Well, the library
I was gonna say
would
the,
be,
yeah, the library.
but I understand the connection between Vernus and
Yeah.
teaching.
Yeah.
What did she teach?
Oh, she taught a number of the different elementary grades, during her whole tenure here.
The problem with donating anything or asking for anything to go to the library is the trustees there make all the decisions about their art.
That's right, Kate.
So we
Yeah.
can't, but you know, there's the high school, there's also Lister Academy as options.
I mean,
Lister Academy.
But that's a small number of students.
small number of students and wouldn't really be seen to people.
Exactly.
When my kids were little, they did read Toni Morrison in one of the advanced English classes, so that might be an interesting tie-in in high school.
At the high school.
At the high school.
Blue eyes.
Yeah.
But you're right, it is a band. Some of her works are currently in the band book.
Yeah, I don't.
Because, you know, she hadn't obviously taught in a long time. It is not as if there are current students in any of the
That
middle
is true.
school or elementary school that her name means anything. So if the work is more appropriate for high school level and she was a beloved Portsmouth teacher, I think that that's covered, you know,
Good point.
because
Well, so bringing up these issues to the council and then having the council's deliberation go to the school board, I think is the next step progress.
The council can accept the donation and then refer to the school board for, you know, approval, or if it goes into the schools and if it's not, if they decide no, then then it can come back to FAR for a decision on where else it goes.
Yeah.
could we be specific and suggest the high school library?
Yeah.
Be a good place for it.
For Toni Morrison.
Yeah.
Yes,
That's great.
more
I
people
love
would
the
see it in the
library.
foyer.
They do it, they have a
Yeah.
great
Yeah.
library.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's partly visibility is part of it.
Yeah.
But that can also be a discussion that they have. Okay,
Do you need a motion?
we typically don't do this. We
Okay.
typically try to do a consensus on the write-up. And then the last thing here is, when we talked last to Vito, he did express some interest in coming to Portsmouth. So, we would like to issue an invitation to him to see if he's interested in coming up. And if you've read about him, you know, he has many things he can talk about. You know, he's internationally known and he's a hoot in
Futurist.
a futurist, and he's really got a great sense of humor. We've
Oh,
in
yeah.
just interacting with him. So I think we would, if he is willing to come up and do a presentation, that we would plan a dedication around
He was
his
really
time.
charming when he gave his presentation to us.
He is, and he's continued to be charming, and our legal department would say manipulative.
Charm.
Very.
That's why he's successful.
So I think we'll issue the invitation. Probably from you, Sean.
Yeah.
And see what his schedule allows. He's coming from Miami.
Well,
we
probably not
gotta-
in January.
Gotta bring him in October, gotta bring him for the foliage.
Yeah, maybe that would appeal.
And the green and the foliage, particularly good.
Yeah.
Not honestly.
So, I put down a few things. I don't know if we'll be able to do all this at our next meeting, but there's a Market Square plan, I mention it now so that it's on the city's website. It's very detailed. It has suggestions about public art placement. And while we haven't specifically interacted with them, I think we need to review it, and much like we want to weigh in on the Von Mall, we want to weigh in on what we think about that. So, take some time. I haven't thoroughly done it yet, to take a look at that between now and our next meeting. Kate, do you want to give us any?
Yeah, the city council received it a month ago, and the vote is whether or not to approve it is Monday from the city council, but that's a general plan. It doesn't have, pieces of public art. It has suggested locations for public art. And so after that step, then, what happens is ultimately this doesn't get implemented immediately by any means. The reason that the planning was done is so that when we start ripping up roads, they know how to put them back. Because there's gonna be a lot of that, I think the first segment that people are gonna really notice after Von Mall is the end of Congress Street has to be redone. For utilities, but all the utilities down Congress, on Pleasant, they all have to be redone. So all of those roads will ultimately be torn up and redone over the course of the next 10 to 15 years. It's gonna be a long process, though. It's not immediate, is what I'll say. And so no one should anticipate that we suddenly have to come up with 5 or 6 pieces of public art in the next year. It's a long-term process, and each segment of that, as it comes forward, this will serve as a guideline, and then there will be additional planning.
And Bon Mall is a phase. That is
Yes.
a phase of this utility
Yeah.
upgrade. So you'll see another phase and another phase, and hopefully it'll be a similar process.
But I think, again, it's helpful to be early in it so that as we have recommendations or thoughts, and I know from just even talking to some local folks about it who, because of Market Square's meaning for the city, have an interest in supporting public art in Market Square. So some of these things might come at us sooner rather than later. So if we can kind of warm ourselves up to what's in there and what our thoughts are.
And there might be opportunities that people haven't thought about. Like one of the suggestions was for a more prominent fountain, as the existing fountain is. And so a fountain might be, that's something the committee hasn't done yet, but a more prominent fountain might come forward as a question to the city.
Or something more interesting than a prominent. And then, we committed ourselves to do a competition for the Education and Public Art Trust. And so we want to start getting ourselves geared up for that so that when school is back and people are back, that we can do a call for proposals for that. And of course, the garage, we keep putting the garage there, but the garage is still there. Anything else before we see if there's public comment? Do you have a comment?
I didn't have any in mind, but I learned that I have to get myself over to Pierce Island.
I just have to say, one of the things that I thought of when I was there was, oh, we really do need some benches.
Well, we talked
about benches, yeah.
Chris, you had mentioned templates for signage. Might be an opportunity to create a couple options for interesting benches too, that are perhaps more artistic than some of the
Yeah,
just straight.
Yeah.
yeah. Well.
And I
you
know Bob Thorson has
we
talked about
have
having
that.
backs.
Yes, we have that coming to us hopefully soon for a really artistic bench for Vehicle Park.
Just a nice.
Even in those,
Yes.
yes, good idea.
This might be though something that we could flag for the city manager as a new location for a memorial bench. you know, as a possibility. If somebody comes forward and wants a memorial bench and they don't know where they're going to put it.
That's a good idea. Yeah. If there's nothing else, I think a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second and
Early.
Yeah.
Seconded that.
we're efficient.
Good.
Well, is the